I'm going to start out this video on fish handling tips by asking you to do something on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3, hold your breath. And just continue to hold your breath without getting any warning that you were going to need to while I describe tip number 2. Tip number 2 is to use a rubberized, basket-shaped net. It's gentler on the fish, especially compared to non-rubberized nets that are made of a fabric. They can really cut into the fish when they're thrashing around in it. The basket shape is nice and supportive for the fish. If you're a typical person, you've had to breathe by now. Tip number 1 is to minimize the time the fish is out of the water. This is the most important part of fish handling. Always keep the fish in the water if you plan to release it. Just like you a moment ago, that fish isn't able to breathe, and it certainly doesn't know to hold its breath when it's about to get hauled out of the water. The next time you've got a fish out of the water, pretend that you're a surgeon in an operating room. Every second counts, and you have to be precise and careful. Like any good surgeon, you're also going to clean your hands before you handle the patient. In this case, that means just wetting your hands. Fish have a protective layer of slime and sometimes scales, and your dry hands are very good at removing that, which is not good for the fish. So always wet your hand before you handle the fish. As a surgeon, something else you learned in medical school is to always keep your tools handy. Hemostats handy. First of all is jaw spreaders. If you're fishing for pike or muskie in particular, these are essential to have. Don't get the ones that have a nasty spike on the end of them that kind of keeps them in place. Use rubberized ones with a flat area here. All you do is stick it in the pike's mouth. It's not painful at all, and it keeps the fish's mouth open while you go in there and pry out the lure. This little guy absolutely inhaled this. It's times like these you need the jaws of life. Jaw spreaders. And there we go. No harm, no foul. This little guy will be fine now, and without them, it would have been almost impossible to get that out. See you, dude. You don't always need this for pike and muskie, but if they're more deeply hooked, then you're going to need to. Just threw my tools down in some rabbit poo that I didn't notice. Depending how the fish is hooked and how deeply it's hooked, you may need different tools. I like one really long nose plier like this. It's got a fine little mouth on the end, which is quite precise for grabbing the lure back there. This is a great one for pike and muskie in particular. And then for most other fish, I use hemostats. One's fairly large and then one's just a regular size. You can use pliers too, but these are nice and lightweight for backcountry travel. Tip number 5 is something you do before you even get in the boat, and that's reduce the number of hooks on your lure and pinch a lot of your barbs. This is essential for successful catch and release. I often remove the front hook. I find the back one to be perfectly sufficient. Sometimes I'll keep both but clip one hook off of each treble to make a tandem, which is almost equally effective. And then just get a pair of regular pliers and pinch the barbs. It makes it so much easier to remove them from the fish's mouth. If you plan on releasing the fish, it's really a much more enjoyable experience for you. You'll spend a lot less time getting the hooks out, and you'll have less of that grief that you may feel if you're compassionate when you're removing the hooks from a fish. Tip number 6 is do not fish deeper than 30 feet of water. For many species, if you catch them in more than 30 feet of water, the change in pressure causes their organs to expand in a process called barotrauma. Humans can also experience it, scuba divers, for instance. And not only will this almost certainly kill the fish, but it's got to be just an excruciating way to go. Some species, like lake trout for instance, are not affected by barotrauma. They have the ability to burp air out of their air bladder, through their gut and out, which allows them to release the pressure. But generally I would just avoid fishing deeper than 30 feet. The last tip pertains to a fish that you intend to keep. If you're going to keep a fish, dispatch it immediately by clubbing it on the back of the head so that you take out the brain instantaneously.
Exactly what we want. It looks gruesome, but it's a lot nicer than freezing to death on the ice.
Yeah. If you absolutely must keep the fish alive because you're worried about spoilage, it's a hot day, whatever, at least keep the fish in a live well. They're not my favorite, but they're a hell of a lot better than a stringer. Overall, just treat the fish as respectfully as you can. You're a lot bigger than it, a lot smarter than it, so try and show some humility. And lastly, if you're out with your buddies and you see them handling the fish in a bad way, say something. I think this applies more to men than to women, but when guys get together to fish or hunt, there's a tendency for the macho attitudes to come out, and suddenly guys are just chucking their fish back into the water or just not showing any respect. Treating a fish badly doesn't make you a man, and treating a fish with compassion doesn't make you a woman. Compassion is never a bad thing, so let's make sure we give that to our fish. They give so much to us.